So all of those mundane, I want to say, admin tasks or like,
admin, yes.
all of those
The Stack
part is,
Overflow type of
yeah, and it's
things.
just like you
Yes.
spend so many hours like Googling like, why is this happening? It's not even a bug, it's just that you don't know how to write it well.
Yeah.
And like all of that is taken away, like whether it's
Yeah.
code, and also for me in emails, like I could never write good perfect emails before. Like I struggled at writing, and like, and then Scott, my husband, like is just perfect in writing
Yeah.
emails. And I could never be him, and I feel like I
And
can't be him.
And he's not with you 24/7, so you need
Yes.
someone to like
Yes.
review that email.
Exactly. And like I'm still not him, but I'm like closer.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of 2025 for What the Take podcast. It's great to have you here, and thank you so much for coming back. If you're an old listener, if you're a new listener, welcome to the community. Today is going to be a great episode. We've got an awesome expert with us. And yeah, Rene, you want to talk a little bit about our community and how we're excited about this season, this New Year's episodes.
Yeah, of course. So 2025 is going to be a great year for What the Tech podcast, especially because we've started the podcast with an intention to get our listeners to be more aware of AI. There's going to be a lot of different topics we're going to talk about, but also there's going to be a few other things that obviously community driven, will happen. So things like live demo sessions, perhaps even in-person, events that we want to start organizing just to get the community closer. We want to get to know you. We want to see you guys in person,
Exactly.
and I'm sure you all want to see us in person. We might have some merchandise as well. Ideas to get merchandise as well in the pipeline, like T-shirts and hats and things like that. But yeah, I think like as much as we are excited about 2025, we're also very excited about, the opportunities that AI is bringing to the table. We all understand that, everyone's got this crazy fear about, after having watched the Terminator movie, they have this crazy fear about AI. But I think
I'm going to debunk that.
Yes.
And who better not than Mon, our guest today, to get into it. So Mon, welcome. Happy New Year. It's good to have you.
Thank you
Yes.
you both. Happy
Yes.
New Year, and great to be here.
Well,
we're super excited to have you.
I was gonna say we were gonna introduce Mon, but I feel like your resume is, she's an amazing person, but her resume is awesome. So Mon, tell our listeners a bit about yourself.
Yeah, I think I'll start a little from scratch. I've always loved mathematics and a little bit of sprinkle of chemistry and physics as well. And
Women in tech, women in STEM.
Yes. And then I went into studying mathematics, mechanical engineering as well. Did smart prosthetics for a while. Then when I moved to Australia, worked in a few data science roles and went into then engineering leadership focused on machine learning, AI, and also AI research teams. And in the last 5 years, it's been just really, really fun focusing on Gen AI software development applications.
Yeah.
So whether it's code completions, code generation, code chats, while working in GitLab, and as well as evaluating the effectiveness of them, and then going and doing something quite similar on the code review side of things with CodeRabbit.
Awesome.
CodeRabbit, yes.
That's a very impressive journey. And honestly, what I feel like this episode won't be enough. So don't be surprised if you see one again in a future episode. But we'll try and see how much we can unpack today. So Mon, as you mentioned, you've obviously covered artificial intelligence in the past, before it became mainstream, and then you mentioned machine learning. So I feel like we need to start there. We need to kind of rewind and talk about the definitions of those two terminologies and the differences, because I think a lot of listeners, maybe some of them might be new to the space, might still be trying to understand the differences. So what is artificial intelligence, firstly, and how is it different to machine learning, which can be what we can term as a predecessor hot topic in the industry from your perspective?
So I'll I'll talk actually from a economics standpoint of view, and a lot of the economists, how they see um, both machine learning and artificial intelligence is fundamentally it is a segue to drop the cost of prediction. So whether it's machine learning or with artificial intelligence tools, we are trying to predict based on data that has been historically taken, trained into it, and predict what may happen next, whether what will be generated next, what may be in traditional machine learning for, will something churn again or not, whether it's a churn model. And while we started in this journey, generative AI, that concept has been there for a long, long time. But as we got better with deep learning as well as scaling laws to compensate with what research was doing, what we were able to create, and we're getting closer to create, is artificial intelligence in the concept of being digital brains. So whatever we understand of how a human brain functions and works, can we then digitize that brain to really be able to pair and co-pair, be the right co-pilot for the humans, so humans could in some ways be superhumans, or you're able to collaborate with another human better,
Yeah.
or be a better human.
Yeah. Wow.
So at the end of it, that's how I would see it. It's digital brains.
And I don't think I've ever heard the term, superhumans. When people talk about AI, they just talk about super machines, but then not realizing, like you said, it's about the human and how we're trying to make things better for humans as well.
Yes.
So so when you're looking at machine learning, how is that then different to what we saw before?
So in machine learning, it wasn't just about creating that digital brain. It was really about being able to predict the next task or the next whatever the task might be. So it wasn't really then going into that complexity and the reasoning of generating something from scratch, right? Like it was about just saying it's like your weather app, like what may be the probability of it to rain, right? But it is not going then and trying to also put the additional brain and being like, hey, you usually, Vivienne, like wear this, umbrella and raincoat, and maybe you want to do this, and having that interactivity to the point that you can be that superhuman for that day in going through your rainy day, right? Like so I think it's that combination. So we all started with machine learning. We also started with neural nets. I think all of us had one course in university in neural nets, which many people probably told us not to take. It's a nice to have course. So it all started from there, but it was this concept of the more you can make a machine learn, and the more you can figure out how it can mimic the way your brain functions, the more it becomes more intelligent. And so machine learning was just the beginning to get into artificial intelligence.
So it's almost like moving away from a rule-based approach and more having some sort of intelligence which essentially goes beyond just the rule-based approach and can even kind of like give you
Reason.
give you um, almost like with probability, obviously, with some how do you call that, like not probability but more like uncertainty, the outcome that could happen based on a certain path that has been taken into things. But yeah, so that's
So I suppose then the margin of error has reduced as well in terms of like from what a human would do, the machine is like the margin of error is becoming smaller and smaller.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And that goes with a lot of, different things, right? Like if you think about even just like old school, like Amazon recommendation engine, right? Like I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, like it would probably recommend maybe one right thing for you to buy based on your buying behavior, right? But based on then a lot of learning and feedback, you're dialing up accuracy, whether it's for machine learning algorithms or something of a digital brain as well, right? Like that's where the new things of reinforcement learning, RH, LHF, all of that is coming in. And the idea is, you're tuning it, right?
Yes.
And the way you think about tuning these digital brains is just the way you would want to think of, humans with long-term and short-term memory and experiences and feedback, and how can we actually take those learnings and sort of build it into these digital brains as well. So, the accuracy dials up as well.
Okay, great. And so we talked about machine learning being probably the beginning of AI. So when do you think we truly started using AI outside of the mainstream? Before ChatGPT, let's say, became available to the average person, when did we truly start using AI within a business context, organizational context?
Yeah. I think some of the really, really amazing use cases of, I think, AI that we use day to day has been, I think four, I would want to say. One is maps. Maps is
Okay,
a
not
really,
have thought of that.
really
Yeah.
great use case. So, I mean, whether it's Google Maps or whatever maps people use now, but Google really shaping that. Then the second is also search engines. Search engines, they've always had forms of AIs into it. So whether it's a recommendation search engine also, so whether it is Netflix to actually like Google search.
Yeah.
So I mean that's always had different parts of AI into the systems. And then I think one of the best use cases I want to say with Gen AI has actually been in coding applications. So currently, so obviously that is post ChatGPT, but we've seen so much of these larger big success, as well as driverless cars. Yeah, that was the other
that's
one,
what I
right?
wanted to ask you
So
about.
so I would say maps, driverless cars, search and recommendation engines, and then I want to say one of the biggest ones has been coding applications.
Yeah, which we'll jump into shortly. But before we get into that, we need to talk about large language models, and we need to talk about the definition, because I believe, there's a few definitions that seem to be discussed in various forums. So we want to get the definition from your perspective as well. So how would you define large language models?
So large,
not the PhD version.
not the PhD version. Well, I mean, at the end of it, everyone wanted to get a better sense of really being able to understand just the way humans communicate, in specific with a language. So natural language. How can you take all that information of zillions of human communications and natural language in the internet and train systems to be able to give you an output as very similar to that natural language of the human being, right? So it's literally a natural language processed engine, which is thinking about the internet of, zillions of cultures, speak English of different forms or anything, and you've put that together.
Yeah.
And then you can generate something written in English, taking all of these zillions ways of saying hello,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
can say hello in a certain way, right? So in my and from that economic standpoint, then the way I see it is machine learning and AI, they're essentially the drop in cost of prediction, just the way. And there is a professor in University of Toronto. He talks about this as well, as mobile phones is a drop in cost of communication, right?
Yeah.
So for language models, for me, it is for a lot of things, it is similar to having a drop in cost of English or the language the person is speaking to. So when you drop in cost of a certain language, if you drop a cost of something, you use more of that, and you use something less of something else, and you need something else more to complement it. So the dynamics of it changes it. So, and this is me just narrating the economist from University of Toronto, but the way he says it, you drop the cost of tea, you drink more of tea, but you drink less of coffee. And then you may need more sugar and milk, right? So then in the days of language models, if that is dropping the cost of a certain language, right? So going to the topic we are also going it, then what you use more of that, you may substitute it by maybe less of code for software development or coding application, right? But you may need something else more
Okay.
to kind of put that together.
Yeah.
Oh, that's quite interesting. All right. Well, let's talk about software development. So that that is the flavor of the day. So based on your experience, how has artificial intelligence been integrated into software development? And particularly looking at the various stages, because obviously, like you said, you're going to add more of something in a stage than in another one, more AI in a stage than another one. So from your perspective, how has that integration worked? And is it applicable to all types of software? So like looking at application software, is it more within the application software space? Or is it just across all different types of software development life cycles?
Yeah. I guess I'll start with the persona, which is basically developers. So in general, these tools are supposed to be basically friends of the human. So the people who build that software is that developer. So most of the LLM tools are basically, pair programmers or, co-pilot of something you're building at the first part of it. So we started off pretty much post chat GPT into, I think most people were looking into the code completion space. That's the first, I think, almost that wow use case that came out is, like you've started writing a certain piece of code and an AI tool was able to complete it within an instant before you could even complete and finish that code. AI could actually complete that. Now, to dial up that accuracy of it, it needed a whole lot more background, right? Like context. And so once that wow factor came in, then people realized, okay, like to make this applicable, to really, really then see how this can be pair programmed, there's a lot more needed. So ultimately, we want to feel like you're able to write a lot faster, more better, more responsible code with almost little help, right? And you don't have to go into Google, and even a lot of the code completion tool, you don't even have to go to ChatGPT. It is within your ecosystem, and you can just kind of start it, and AI will understand how you want to complete it, right? So that's the code completion part, and that led to then, hey, like, can we just prompt it and it will just generate a part of code, right? So then led to code generation, right? And then it was like, oh, but now I want to make changes to the code. So then it went into code chat, right? So I feel like we've almost read that, like almost that organic ride of one use case leading to another use case, and really understanding how all the things that the software developer needs. Within CodeRabbit, it's been on the code review process. So, you know, when you're on a pull request or a merge request, when you've written the code but you're not sure if it's okay, and you need the reviewer. And we know in a lot of organizations the review process is longer. So can we have the AI to do the first pass of review to get a better sense, whether it's the code review or it's the security or the pipeline failure. So any kind of review at any form and space, right? So I think different applications have had a different entry point to the code space, right? So, and that code being, it is substituted a little by English, right? So that has been the more, but we are nowhere close to fully integrating it, embedding it, and unraveling it end to end, right? I don't think we are yet there where we can say, like, you know, someone has literally built a end-to-end, you know, product with just prompting an AI tool, and it's been done.
And they're just
like,
sitting on the beach and, you know.
So we're not there yet, right? But then you see like amazing tools, whether it's, you know, Cursor or Windsurf, and going into more into the changing the way a developer even approaches this, right? Like, so, and that goes into a little bit also, what are the additional tools needed to make this more effective? Right. So should extensions look exactly like how they look now? Should they look a little bit different? So people can organically interact with it, right? I don't think we have created what I want to say the iPhone of AI in coding. We haven't yet got to that.
And like, when you say the iPhone, just for our listeners, like, what do you mean by the iPhone of coding?
So what I meant was, I think iPhone was one of the before iPhones, we were all about, I think, the Nokia, the Motorola's, and it mimicked the telephone. It was numbers. And, you know, you press the numbers, one had a flip, the other is a little screen. And, you know, and it worked. It's not that it didn't work. It worked for the purpose, like you're trying to call someone and you want to get to someone at any point. But I think what happened with the touch screen is it completely changed the way a human being organically responded with it. And it became a very, it was a very simple UX design, really. And it led to a very different flavor of all the innovation that came after, with all the apps and you know, technology, and it was so easy for slowly adoption of a generational understanding. So like a grandma using iPhone to now the kids' touchscreen is just very natural to them.
I don't think they even know that buttons existed with
you know, that you see a kid, a 5-year-old kid, and they just naturally know, right? And when it comes to, you know, AI and coding, using AI in tools or things, I don't think the tools have gone there yet to have that magic effect. And I don't also think the developers at the same point they're not fully organically,
Really
right?
deep,
It's
right,
still in
yeah.
a little bit of the phase, like, oh, so cool, it could do it. And
Yeah.
I mean, like, at a scale of, at a mass.
Mainstream.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure there are organizations who are obviously early adopters,
Yeah.
right? Like, so yes, there is that, but you don't yet see that, and it's a combination of these tools getting just better in quality, and then better with the UX, and I do think there is a chance that this will all the idea of writing code and writing software will fundamentally look very different in the next 5 years.
But
Yeah.
so do you think all of that is also because if you look at the full life cycle of a software development life cycle, like the planning phase, for instance, that still requires a human in the loop. If you look at system design, and architectural design is still human. The coding part is probably the part that can be almost
Like it's
fully
the first
AI
one.
automated
Yeah.
bit, and then the other parts are not. Is do you think that's why we don't have that iPhone kind of revelation into the software development space?
Really, because I think there is a lot of intellectuality even in the coding part.
Yeah.
I think, and even in the system design and where you put the brains and you kind of build it, there's a part that is already like automated. Like any of the language models can create beautiful moment diagrams right now. So
Yes.
so there is still quite enough automation, and then from the moment diagrams, looking at it, then you go into the agentic flow. Can you generate code? Then look into this, and then can you then create a PR? So it's sort of, we're still kind of getting there. It's more on, I want to say, on the effectiveness and the reasoning of it and the complexity of it. So we, as the language models get better at reasoning, better at agentic flows, the more the Gen AI applications doing coding or the peripheries. And there's a lot of tricks to make these tools really smart, right? And so that needs to be there. So there is UX tricks, there is even computation tricks, inference tricks. There's so many tricks to make that. And I think it's that combination journey to really then understand and nail the psychology of the developer and understand like what are your pain points of the day and how do you actually then use technology to make them that superhuman, so the super developer, right?
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
and so it takes it's I want to say it's an art and science together,
Yeah.
combined to really get there. I do think that individually all organizations would need to start thinking about what that looks like. What is that human AI collaboration to make
Yes.
something just beautifully
Beautiful,
like
yeah.
majestic
Yeah.
and have a speed
And
and
I
quality.
like the words you're
Yeah.
using because everyone don't always think about like AI as this amazing
Yeah.
bulletproof to
I mean,
solve.
you have to hope that there is AI for good, right? Like
Yeah.
that is what we are all hoping
That's
for,
that,
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
So like this and every organization needs to think through this, right? Like you have X number of developers, how do we make them, and they all come off different experiences, phases, some struggle something and something else versus others, and then how do you give them tools that each one are these as a unit, like this super the super team, right?
Yeah.
And so, and this is where AI comes in, and so it really matters on how you use it, how you put that together, and meanwhile, as these AI applications also need to understand all of these audiences to figure out as a unit, right? Like, if you want to complete all kinds of code, like what do you need? Or if you want to review all kinds of code, like what is it that you need
Yeah.
from a quality perspective as well as from a user experience
Yeah.
perspective.
You mentioned agentic workflows. Would we cover that now? I mean, we could briefly.
We
do you
could.
do you want to touch on that a little bit more, just to unpack it for our listeners? Like,
Yeah.
what do you mean when you talk about agentic workflows
You
in
know,
context of software development?
this has like, it's come out. I feel like this word has existed all of 2024. Like I remember even like 2024 starting, and that was like, I want to say the first of like this, you know,
Okay,
like
so it's a fresh terminology.
yeah, like a fresh,
Yeah.
like, you know. And I remember, and I feel all of 2022 it has been complete confusion and chaos of understanding what that word means.
Yeah.
I remember even like within like our teams and things, like everyone had their own definition
Yeah.
actually. So I think like whether it's like and the strange part is, I remember like the from the NIPS conference, like, you know, when Ilya spoke about like, you know, the things that are going to happen is more like reasoning, better reasoning, which means better unpredictability, agentic flows, and synthetic data. I just remember like Twitter and LinkedIn just like coming up
Going
with their own
crazy.
meanings with that happen, and which is fantastic, right? Like everyone is entitled to
Yeah.
think, because these, no one knows what they all actually mean or do.
Yeah.
But it is, agent to me is very similar to what I would want to say, a catalyst for chain of actions, right? Like, so it's just a way that in our brains, like when we see something or an image, it may trigger XYZ events and actions. And agent is a very similar approach of having that sort of a, a trigger moment of for the next action that can lead to the next
Hence
action.
workflow. Or
Yes.
Flow. Yeah.
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 Yeah. So for example, like, that's like, and that's going to mimic. So, you know, a developer starts writing code, and then you want them to not just complete the code, but also, you know, do security checks, you know, then start the CI pipeline, and then you want them to then after that do a review. After the review, you found some faults, so do a follow-up, you know, code and a merge request or a pull request again. So these are all just sort of these one to next, like next steps of, you know, sequence of actions that leads to this sort of agentic kind of flow. But the same way is also happening with the LLMs, where they're getting better reasoning to understand what action leads
come
to the next
next,
action,
yeah.
right? So a lot of them, so it's going hand in hand, while the applications are going like, okay, you know, now we've given you A and then you need B, and we can just sort of trigger that B to C to D. So you're just part of that journey, right?
Yeah.
And it seemed quite similar in driverless cars as well, right? Like it is a full agentic flow where you want to go A to B, and it's a lot of different sequences
Yeah.
that is leading from one to others
Would you
as well.
would you say, actually, not that, would you say, for the listeners, would you perhaps give an idea of, you know, RPA, robotic process automation, versus agentic? Like, do you have an idea what could be the difference between the two? Because some people will call it, you know, we're doing agentic, but it's been around. We've been doing RPAs for a long time, and they will just be like, There's nothing new there, and there's no point to like make a fuss about it. But some people will be like, but it's different. So
This is the first I've actually heard that. Actually, I haven't heard this before, but that's interesting. I don't think this is automation
Mm-hmm.
because this is triggering. This is not saying A to B and just you
yeah,
know.
I mean, I see what you mean, because essentially what we're saying, what you're saying is that RPA, there's a set of rules that the process has to follow, and we kind of like integrate that into a system that will perform those steps without a human getting involved in it. Whereas with agentic, it still follows the same process, but there could be a scenario where, um, you know, the LLM will perhaps decide of an alternative, route to get to another solution based on a scenario, just because you gave it tools to be able to decide which path to take. But then obviously, you know, based on the different agents you have throughout the whole pipeline, there's going to be, maybe like an agent that is there to review the process so that it aligns with the objective that was initially predefined for that process to follow. So I think, like, that's probably where you were heading to. Maybe
Yeah,
was I
yeah.
just too?
I think so because so agents, I mean, at the core of it would also be considered these like micro specialized digital brains, right? Like they
Yes.
are triggering and they can get any kind of information,
Mm-hmm.
and then they are doing a processing based on the way
The
we've
info.
asked it to
Yeah.
think,
Mm-hmm.
and it's triggering the next kind of form of events, and there is a whole lot of permutations and combinations into that, because you're basically tuning a small digital brain to know how to interact with a larger digital brain, which is the LLMs, right? And then kind of going into it. While with RPA, I don't actually see any brain.
Yeah.
You know, it's just a to B, and
yeah.
it's a structured automation process. And the reality is, the more complex things get, the more you need to reason, the less you can just automate it A to B,
automation.
right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you actually can't, because there's just so much complexities.
Yeah.
And so these sort of agentic flows are basically your co-pilots that kind of just work with you throughout your process, right? I don't think having something automated it's good. It will
It's not
save
going
you
to be
some
good enough
time.
anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It will save you some time, but it won't empower you to actually be a better
Do
coder
better. Yes.
Yeah.
or build better software.
Yeah.
Like the
And
software, yes.
yeah.
That's a really great point there when we talk about, automation, because I think a lot of organizations, and now we're going to go into the tangible results, right? A lot of organizations, there was a point in time when they were focusing on, you need to automate everything. That's where everything is going, and that will be like the best scenario that we can have. But now you're talking about automation not being the silver bullet that people think it is. We need to do more than just automate. So when it comes to the use of AI within software development, we need to measure. If you can't improve what you don't measure, so what are the tangible results that you've seen in your experience with your clients or within your own teams, so that at that micro level and also at the macro level within organizational context or industries, that you can share?
Yeah. So I think this part of what I call like the AI impact of really just being able to measure, it's actually opened up a lot of interesting, conversations also, that even before AI, how were organization effectively, measuring the impact of everything you're doing,
Yeah.
specifically in, engineering orgs, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know, does your code, or, what you did from morning, whatever, 8 or 9 till 6 or 7, like, how does that relate to productivity? And so it's brought up a very interesting almost topic, like, because it's something organizations should be doing and figure out ways, and it's very hard.
Yeah.
It's actually quite hard to just figure out the productivity. You sometimes have surveys, and and specifically in larger organization, I remember seeing a survey. It's like, oh, like, 15% of the org basically does nothing. Like, you have those sort of, like,
Yeah.
and then there are, like, tools like GitHub and GitLab. They give you the APIs to measure, things like PR rates, MR rates. So from the time you've created an issue as an idea to deploying and merging that code, and your cycle time for it. And
So when you say deploy, you mean going into production?
yeah, so and you can have different kind of like timestamps into it, like when you've merged the MR, when you've deployed it to prod, or how long it's been in review. And so there's, like, a lot of time-based metrics that organizations were already using.
Yeah.
And they've had a little bit of that advantage of just being able to see that when you've embraced AI in that organization, has your cycle time reduced,
significantly. Yeah.
and are you able to push code faster, and are you able to, the bottlenecks of your review process, if you're using AI in review, if they were taking longer, is it taking shorter now? Yeah. However, I still think that that's just the starting point. And in reality, like, it's very, very hard yet to sort of holistically measure every details of it. And I do think that's an area that a lot of the organizations will start looking into, especially as they ramp up even the AI education systems, and the fact that not in large organizations, you don't have every developer embracing AI the same way.
Yeah.
So so how do you then understand, like, how everything is impacting to the product you're building?
If everyone's
kind
not
of-
using it.
I think and I think also because most of the time productivity has obviously some sort of monetary component in it. So because it's hard to measure it, but from an engineering, so at the micro level, it makes sense because, for instance, for an engineer like me, for instance, if I would get to work on a product that someone had written in Go, for instance, I can use an AI coding assistant and, perhaps like be able to kind of like get to a solution or like work on that ticket and push it into for review, right? But that's at the micro level. So for me, as an engineer, I can see the impact of using an AI coding assistant and how it makes me productive. But whether that translate into more money for that organization, that's usually like the discrepancy that I kind of feel like it's hard to, because
wouldn't
what
you-
the board wants
yeah.
to see, because they don't really care whether an engineer took them,
Well, I
2 hours
I
less to
suppose
solve the
it would
problem.
it would
versus,
be like a cumulative thing, in the sense that if you are able to go to market with whatever product you are building, or
Yeah.
enhancement of your product, that would be great for the board, because then obviously the customers would be happy. So I would say that
True, yeah.
would be an indication of the macro level, where you can see those results going through
Yeah, I think
top.
that goes back to even pre-AI, right? Like, do you have your engineering and product metrics very nicely linked to really understand your end-to-end productivity, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
So engineering metrics usually is, like, merge time, churn rate, technical debt.
Yeah.
So that sort of metrics, right? But if you want to see that end-to-end productivity, that cycle of yours needs to be nicely
yeah.
kind of built.
Yeah.
And I mean, obviously, like Google has it really nicely done to really be able to map your end-to-end productivity. I believe, I forget their method. I think it's called the RICE method. But
Okay.
um, but yeah, I feel like now at the time of AI, especially when there's so much transitions between tools and the way you approach the problem, the way you code the problem, everything is slowly shifting. And so having that lens to really understanding that impact will only accelerate that journey. Yeah. So it's almost like it was always needed, but it was still like a luxury.
Yeah.
And now I feel like it's absolutely needed in every organization to figure out your software to product engineering impact with and without AI.
Yeah, and I think like also just to add a bit on that, the new organization that I joined that I'm working for, they have no AI coding assistant, right? And I'm a big advocate of it. The one of the engineers that only got interested in using, a coding, some sort of AI assistant, is because what he does on a daily basis is writing cloud formation templates for AWS. But we all know that cloud formation templates are like super hard to like, because you need to think about like the different services and how they all connect together, because when you do the deployment, that's essentially the tool that you're putting into the new environment. So now his question to me was, can you help me with my cloud formation template? If I say no, then obviously it's a no go. It's not going to be interested in using that AI coding assistant. But if I say yes, which obviously what I did, he got excited and he's like, I'm keen to hear more about this in the new year. So in the new year, I'll be introducing I'll be introducing AI coding assistant to the engineering team so that they can all try to see how they can be all super efficient, becoming superhuman.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think that even touches that education piece.
Yes.
So that also becomes pretty key, is the awareness and how to use what kind of tools.
Yeah.
Because a lot of them, and it's just interaction and experience, you just have to play with the tools enough. There's no playbook. And because these tools are made as digital brains, it's like, it's a little like dating, right? Like you just have to kind of keep going and
Yes.
get a better
Until you-
sense.
yes.
And you may go like try one the first time and it's just like, okay, like
No ways. I'm like,
no way this
yeah.
works for me based on the stage I am in my coding journey. But then it's a little bit of that. There is that education, and there is a lot of lack of that education as well. There's a lot of aversion based on people being. I've seen a lot of aversion from very advanced developers actually, because they're just really really good.
Yeah, they're like, I know, I'm already superhuman. I don't need this.
Exactly. So yeah, and then and the way they should interact with these tools may be just quite different to someone who's actually like a product manager who's never coded, and he could just write these two easy lines and just
Yeah.
ship it and not even disturb the engineers. So
Yeah.
so I think there is that education part, and as an organization you would need to rethink a little bit of how you would approach software building, and then how would you measure that,
Yeah.
and end to end, right? So it's the software engineers, product managers, engineering managers all kind of come together collectively. That kind of goes into it.
Yeah, and the education piece is really interesting, like you said. And I think it touches on the, like you said, the again collaboration, that collaboration aspect. In your experience, like how does AI complement human creativity, problem solving, and how do we make that education journey more organic and natural for the engineering teams, so that they can excel?
I think this one is really, really interesting. And it goes back to, I think, what Rene was saying. Like, that was that particular engineer, and he's like, okay, this is my pain point. Can you show me if AI can do it? And maybe I will embrace it, right? And I believe, like, there are, everyone has these sort of, like, almost checklist
Yeah.
of things that are either painful for them or annoying for them, or they're just like not good, but they have to spend the time. And I think we've all, I think, in our lifetime of coding, have had so many. I remember for me, it was SQL. I just completely hated SQL, and
my God,
I just wish,
SQL.
like, you know, like ChatGPT existed in my, prime days of SQL,
Yeah,
and
we will be super
Super
we
analysts.
were like,
Yeah,
we would
super
have been the superhumans
Super
10 years
analyst,
ago.
yes.
But so I think everyone has that, and so you take an individual journey of being open,
Yeah.
and it's similar again to the dating, but you gotta be open,
Yeah.
and so
Inquisitive,
inquisitive, curious, right, and understanding who you are, what tool can complement you the best, and really taking the risk of taking that journey
Yeah.
together, and seeing where it sort of goes.
Yeah.
Like, you got to experiment, and sometimes it has to be multiple tools, multiple times. So and kind of go through your speed dating process.
Yeah.
Just with all of these tools and kind of just getting a better sense. But the idea for me, the way to think about it is, what I like about when I use them is, personally, and I don't code a lot now in my current day to day, but I will like look into code or give people, engineers, inspiration or things like that. What I do like is I'm able to, we've gone from days of like Googling how to write this function correctly to AI tools like writing it, and you, as a human being, your creativity and problem solving is much more empowered. So all of those mundane details, like, syntax, vocabulary of coding or writing a function, and, you mentioned, like, if you had to write in Golang, like, how to do something like Python to Rust or something like that. And so all of those mundane, I want to say, admin task, or like,
admin, yes.
all of those
The
part
Stack
is,
Overflow type of
yeah, and it's
things.
just like you
Yes.
spend so many hours like Googling like, why is this happening? It's not even a bug, it's just that you don't know how to write it well.
Yeah.
And like all of that is taken away. Like, whether it's code, and also for me in emails. Like, I could never write good perfect emails before. Like, I struggled at writing, and like, and then Scott, my husband, like, is just perfect in writing emails. And I could never be him, and I feel like I
And
can't be
and
him.
he's not with you 24/7, so you need
Yes.
someone to like
Yes.
review that email.
Exactly. And like, I'm still not him, but I'm like closer,
Yeah.
like, it's just like I can write something looking professional.
Yeah.
And same with code, right? So it's like I was never the perfect coder. But I was always someone who loved problem solving. And so now it's like that interaction is really, really fun. And then at the same time, like, I've been using a lot of them. So whether, and also while we are building it as well, like, like, for us, it's like how much context is needed to really understand something, like when you're building these code assisting application. And then when I'm in the user consumer side of it, it's the same, it's like, okay, how much should I be telling that? How much information do you need so you can give me the right piece of advice or recommendation?
Yeah.
And so it's really a dance, and I think it's a fun one. I don't think it's not here to substitute you. It's just there to complement you, make you a better version, and like together. And I think it's also, at the end, my hope is it also helps with human to human collaboration as well, right? Because we used to have days when like people would have so many useless meetings. Like speaking of things that are literally can be
An email.
yeah,
Yeah.
automated or
Yeah.
just like, just like done by
Yeah.
a bot, and so I hope like with things like this. So if, for example, even in code review, right? Usually you have merge request and then a human reviewer goes through your code, and there are some very small silly mistakes with
Yeah.
the AI is able to pick up. So the coder is able to already like make those changes because the AI was able to pick up, right? So then the human coder and the reviewer coder can actually have a meaningful
More
interaction.
focused on the less
Exactly,
minuscule
meaningful
things. Yeah.
interaction, maybe less time, but much more quality time to really then interact and brainstorm on that merge and pull request. And that just helps with that,
Yeah.
human to human collaboration
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah. And do you think, like, going back to Rene's example, where he said he's going to present to his engineering team about using
And
the tool, right?
yeah, an AI coding assistant.
Yeah, the coding assistant. Do you think then organizations need to be quite flexible when it comes to approving all these tools? Like, a lot of them, I'm assuming, are going to have some free, like ones that you don't have to subscribe
I think
to. Like, how is that going to be
Yeah.
navigated for security reasons and for other reasons, of course?
Yeah, I think and this is just even me understanding how organizations are approaching it as well. There's a massive difference between, I want to say, SMB as well as enterprise organization. I think some of the enterprise organization which I've really really loved seeing what they do is actually have a really dedicated team as part of like developer experience, who really, if you have 10,000 engineers in the team and so many different products lines and things like that, like how do you then understand what works, what doesn't work, whether it's with responsible AI, productivity of engineers, also the kind of task, right? For different teams, it may be different things, right? Some may be like just migration of systems and code. Some may be just like bug detection before you deploy apps, right? Like many teams as collectively slow down for one thing. So there's an individual, but also many teams. So I do like some of the organizations that I've spoken to, and they actually have dedicated team who look into actually a combination. They build in-house like Gen AI tools as well as what is out there, and a mix of that to really understand what is the company's full productivity
Yeah.
that goes forward. So I think that is a really, really fun and exciting journey, because that also goes to something that we didn't cover is actually AI teammates. Right, so so we talked a lot of the AI in the coding space, but AI as a teammate for a software developer, and how would that? So all of these baby steps would actually then end up leading to something like that. So I think as large the organization get at this stage, having a dedicated team looking into this end to
Software
end.
Developer experience, like you said.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. For an organization very thoroughly and taking all the steps needed. And it's always going to be a combination of, I think, at least currently, in-house built tools with also everything available as well. It's you do want it to be still personalized to your code, and none of I don't think anything is out there that can basically build your product end to end. So you would need that combination of both come together.
Yeah. And you talked about building software that is in a responsible way. So that is going into the concerns about AI, whether it's bias, security, over reliance. How can organizations use AI responsibly and still deliver on those outcomes that we
those
want?
apps, those applications,
Yeah.
for the end user.
I think you have to have a triage of the risks. If it's like a small code change and it's really not going to impact anything but at the same time, it doesn't make the coder be a better coder, something like that. Like that is a very different kind of a risk rather than when AI is generating someone's password and no one was able to, pick that up as
Yeah.
well, right? So I think having a good sense of triaging the risk as well as having a risk capital. Like you have to have a risk capital into it, like, and know once a risk is violated, what that means, really. So just getting that, and especially if it's like, like a financial organization, a fintech and things like that, like it's much more larger
Yeah.
than maybe like a dev tool,
Yeah.
for example. I mean, it's so,
So risky,
but there is a whole
yeah.
lot of regulations and compliances and kind of being there. So I think, I mean, as far as the LLM providers, they are being as transparent as they can as to what is going into their tuning and training and how a certain organization data is not going and not there. But on top of that, when you're building tools on top of these applications, you have to have your own sort of like risk triage, and then being able to then understand how would you actually approach it and address it.
And again, do we need dedicated teams? Like you talked about dedicated teams for software developer experience.
I think it depends on how large the organization is and how risky it can be. Like, what is that impact of the risk? But as for an enterprise organization, having a team focused on responsible AI is key.
Yeah.
And the reality is the more the model can reason, the more the applications get intelligent, the more risky it is because it's going to be more unpredictable as well, right?
Yeah.
So the reality is, if you start now, that whole journey, whether it is that team who is helping understand the app, the tools that everyone needs, or a very separate team on ethics as well and responsible AI. But I do think that definitely helps accelerate and also gives you that confidence to kind of do it right. So having
Yeah.
dedicated teams to be able to assess it
Yeah.
is really key in an enterprise organizations as well. If organizations can afford
Yeah.
having these teams.
Yeah. So when you say afford, I suppose the question for me then is, we've seen in some organizations where they haven't done things right at the beginning and it's become a cost for them further down the track, once they build legacy, so to speak. Do you think that that might be the case with teams who don't focus on the responsible building of their products now, and then further down the track they kind of have to do it retrospectively?
Yeah, I do think, well, there are two parts. Well, first, if organizations are not embracing AI, it's time to start doing it. So that's the first part.
You heard it.
So
You heard it
You
best.
heard it.
so I mean that's really really key. And then with any technology, and specifically this one, because this has a high risk with its mimicking as much of a human brain. So it comes with its own sort of newer forms of risks, something that people would not even be
Have
able to
thought
guess. You
about.
don't even know
Yeah.
why the AI works the way it does, because we don't know why the human brain works the way it does,
Yeah.
right? So then you need your responsible AI team, you need your evalves team,
Governance.
so yeah, so like it's like the MRI scan of the brain team, right? Like, so you need, and so if there are organizations who can afford it, they need to start that now.
And if
Right.
they can't afford it, do you think that they should seek sort of like external support in a way that allows them to still, cover those bases for themselves?
I think it depends again on the risk triage, right? Like, if it's if it's a SMB client and you're using AI to complete code, you're okay because you're still having the human really write it, and it's a pair program. But there are organizations who are using it in a very different form, whether it's in chatbots and and things like that with customers. And
Yeah.
so I think it depends, again, really triaging that and understanding that risk as well as your risk capital. And once you get a better sense, to really act upon it. Right.
Yeah.
But they are all sort of weirdly linked, actually, like the AI impact versus responsible AI versus the human AI collaboration, and they all like strangely like linked. And I do think there'll be also evaluation in a strange way with this as well, like being able to evaluate the effectiveness, whether it's doing something wrong or actually valuable, and helpfulness and honesty, all of that. So I think at some form there'll be newer forms of, I want to say, teams as well as jobs
Yeah.
that will be created as well, that kind of puts this effectiveness sort of together. And I think it's a combination of art and science. It's very much engineering science, right? Like this is not necessarily going to be like A/B testing, and this is not going to be theory. So this is very much like understanding of how humans function, human brains function, all of that, and putting this into this science into this engineering area, and getting all of that all together, all these different fields that we were talking about.
Yeah.
And I think just going back to that MRI and how to understand the brain, I'm not sure if you have it in one of your questions, but the recent announcement from
Yeah, of course. Like the
OpenAI
artificial general intelligence.
intelligence.
Yeah, and just looking at the difference.
But then
yeah.
even just besides that topic of AGI, there was some articles, I think, not article, a paper written by this research lab called Apollo Research, and they wrote about, you know, those LLMs kind of like jailbreaking.
Yeah, and trying to stay alive.
Yes, because of how in the future those risks are coming more and more. They're becoming more and more like, what's the word, like kind of like part of our day-to-day operations, and we need to start, which is what you said, like creating more roles where we need to really understand
the risk that
the
we're
risk
taking,
that we're
the
taking by
opportunity
using
that
those
we're taking, the
AI,
risks,
integrating AI, merging AI into. Not to say that it's we shouldn't be using that. It's more about how we understanding. It's the same way, like you mentioned, with the how from moving from like the traditional phone to the the tap screen, some of the opportunities that came along with it, and some of the the challenges, all the the challenges, and the things that came with it. Like, for instance, like we can now take photos, but then because you have a screen now, like you can either tap onto it or you can just watch things. But now it means that you can kind of like spend more time just watching
on your phone
screen
rather than
interacting with other people. It's the same way with AI, but it was quite interesting to see the research that they performed and seeing how the LLM was able to, without necessarily having the prompt, but understanding that I'm doing this task, but somewhere in the middle, as I'm performing the task, some of the information that I'm consuming to perform the task, one part says, at some point they'll shut me down. So, the model was able to replicate itself and create a copy of itself into another server, so that and start, prompting or like telling the the human user that, hey, use this other model. So if you want to shut it down, that's the one you're going to shut down. But my original version still exists. So it's just interesting how these models are just creating more opportunities and more risk, which means that in the future we're just gonna have to be a bit more like creating more opportunities. So I think, like, upskilling into the AI space is And when I say upskilling, is for all of us,
For
whether you're already
different
in
areas.
tech or
Yeah.
you're just new in tech or you're looking from the outside in.
Mm.
So it's just, what I think it's going to be the future.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what is artificial general intelligence?
Oh, me.
That was
I
for
can
you,
give a
like,
crack, but you can
you
go
How
for
know.
about
it.
you go first?
No, I don't know. Like it's so you've already defined what's machine learning and
AI,
artificial
yeah.
intelligence. So general intelligence is just the ability to give those model ability. Uh, they can think beyond the data that they've been trained on.
Mm-hmm.
So, because when we say general intelligence, and that also goes to some of the articles and videos that I've watched before. Many of the LLMs that we tend to use, they react almost as if it's intuition. So, you type your question and you get an answer straight away.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a very intuition type of way of like reacting. The general intelligence means that now beyond the data that it's been trained on, it's got the ability to think for itself and reassess and perhaps give you an answer that you didn't predict or you didn't expect to come out of. So so yeah, it's just essentially your traditional, when I say traditional, is like 2 years ago type of like GPT 3.5 up to 040, where the model will give you an answer straight away, but then now this time the model can think, can go and reason. There's some reasoning attached to it, and then it can give you an answer, which is very close enough to how the human
would
brain
do it.
the human
Yeah.
brain will think. But anyway, so that's the very simplistic definition that I can provide. Do you have, I don't know, like,
Yeah, I think it is about the ability to reason the way a human brain does and understand and goes to a more intellectual level for a task. And it may even be able to surpass human cognitive capabilities as well at some point. But it's really a branch, and I think most of the LLM providers, what we want them to do is get that digital brain to reason, understand, and learn as close to as a human brain as well. Um, and but the reality is also we don't exactly know why the human brain acts the way it does.
yeah,
So the more this gets closer, the more we're not going to not know, right? So and it goes back to even the agent, right? So within the LLMs also, like in our head, it's one action leads to another action leads to another, right? Like it's a trigger process. So that's actually going the same way for these LLMs as
general
well, to get
intelligence,
to AGI as well, is really being able to get better in that reasoning and understanding of various different triggers.
Yeah. And when you talk about the digital brain, I think like everyone has different varying levels of intelligence. If we talk about IQ, right?
yeah.
What are we aiming for with the digital brain? Is it like the highest IQ we could have possibly not imagined? I don't want to say ever imagined, but is that what we're kind of heading towards, where this brain is just like has never been, experienced before?
I might say that for for the investors, yes, they want to achieve that because it means that they get more money. I mean, if an OpenAI managed to reach that level, it means that the investors that put in money in, they get their return because now OpenAI, is becoming this very valuable organization. but it comes with a whole set of risk, you know. And it's good on one side because it helps to now have, if we, well, the challenge that I'm seeing, because as much as we want to think about the good things, the downside will be if you look at the food chain, you know, from a natural standpoint, if you have a higher IQ on top of human intelligence, then now
So we're living in the sci-fi movies.
yes.
I think at the end of it, these are still tools, right? Like,
But anything like this higher
The tools
IQ,
that can outthink us. I don't
I
know.
think as
yeah,
like
which,
higher IQ.
I mean, they, in a lot of ways, you just get comfortable how to use them, right? Yeah, like Claude writes better emails than me. So, like, yes, it's 100%.
Yeah.
yeah,
You know,
yeah.
so yeah, like you get comfortable knowing how to use a tool that can that you still use and can outlive.
And have
Yeah.
control over.
Yeah. So and yes, it will be very interesting to see in this as we go towards AGI from, like, you know, policies, government, like from larger entities, what happens. But at the core of it, like, if we know how to use a tool right, it can do a lot of good, right? And you suddenly have access to different, like, I have people who've never coded before and are coding something, right? So you know, and then there is the healthcare space, like,
Yeah.
you know, you can detect in areas where the
Preventative
human eye can't
healthcare,
go,
yeah.
right? Like, so there is a lot of good as well.
Yeah.
And it's then really just getting comfortable at what the humans are good at, and then using something to be the more efficient version, I want to say, right? Like, so I don't think, like, you know, like, just the way humans talk and, you know, make mistakes, or even, I think the other part, I was looking at a philosopher and he was like, you know, like, at the core of it, LLMs are not going to, like, be angry and swear. You know, so yeah, like, what that concept of higher, like, it will be so reference to the context and what you're really trying to do,
That is
you know,
true,
like,
yeah.
and so it's at the core of it, like, we're not humanizing AI. Humans are still humans, and the idea is this is a tool for you to be superhuman, how
Yeah.
you want to be the superhuman.
Yeah.
True. Yeah.
Yeah.
We stay in control. Well, I think our time's up for today, but we've had such
Wait,
an
I have
enriching
one more
conversation.
question
Yeah, one more
for our
question.
guest.
Okay.
And I think that's a question that people, it's just for everyone out there. And I'm pretty sure everyone is kind of asking the same question. So with these AI coding assistants, do you really think that it's still worth learning coding? Is it still worth it? Because
For the next generation.
for the next
of
generation, because like
tech-
Yeah.
right now we're still at the very early stage of what a coding assistant is, but in the future they might be as good as, like, you know, anyone out there. So do you really need to know how to code?
Yeah. I think it's same as, you know, just because there is calculators, do we need to learn math? You know, like, it's
that's a
quite
good
similar,
point.
right? And the reality is, it just, though, when you learn, like, the fundamentals of coding language, the basics, the syntax, as boring as it may seem at that time, or the logic of it, I think you just train your brain to
Yes.
think in a certain way
That's so
Yeah.
true.
and solve a problem. And so even when you are using these tools to apply, you just do
Still need
have
that same thinking.
same thinking process. And so it empowers you,
Yeah.
and you just get much better
Yes.
at using them. So I do think that the fundamentals will always and will stay important for a while, till yes, we get to a point where we can just push a button and build products at scale.
Yeah.
But till then, I think it's still important.
So
And I
it's
would,
Good
so it
point.
sounds like what you're saying is maybe the focus shouldn't be on the programming language itself, but the logic, like be
The
able to
problem
understand
solving, the thinking.
logic,
Yeah.
like because I remember like back in, I don't know if it was the same when you went to the States to study maths, but where I studied maths back home, we had a course which was like we don't write, we're not in front of the computer. Literally, like on a piece of paper, they give you a problem and you have to write the algorithm on how you're going to solve it. Literally, you have to write, I'm going to do this, then I'm going to do a for loop. I have with
yeah,
some like, a while statement here and there, and then come out of it and literally writing the steps of the algorithm on how
yeah,
this is going to be solved, as opposed to focus on I'm going
a
to use
language.
Python or C, or all the low language programming, low
Yeah,
level language that out there.
yeah. I think it's like it's. I think it's a combination. I want to say because you need that logic and the basics to really just understanding even
What?
just human computer interaction, like
Yeah.
why just Boolean, like what is 0 in computer and 1 in computer, like just like the fundamentals, and then having a rough understanding of those whenever people are coding those top few languages, just getting a better understanding of a certain kind of syntax,
Mm-hmm.
a certain kind of, you just do have a cutting edge. It's like when you understand the basics of language, but then you can speak English, French, and
Yeah.
like Spanish, right? Just enough, right?
Yeah.
So that just gives you a little bit of a, I think, edge and a little bit better understanding. And I think that is not going to go anywhere for a
Yeah.
while.
Yeah.
So I do think that they are all tools to help you accelerate in that journey, because you can literally use AI coding assistants to learn a new language, see the difference between two language, and
Yeah.
and you can even generate and learn the logic of different kinds of coding as well. So I think it's all become quite easy,
Yeah. More
the
accessible.
knowledge and
Yeah.
accessible, and it's like very raw and embedded into your ecosystem. And it's just still, I think, still important to kind of go through that process. Now, whether in universities, I think the way you approach coding may different. I mean, I know we talked about like in the paper. I don't think I actually I mean, I coded in MATLAB in,
Yeah,
yeah.
MATLAB was the one that you could write.
Yeah, like I don't I didn't I definitely didn't learn Python in uni.
I didn't. Neither do I. Neither did
So,
I. Neither did
like
I.
yeah, so I feel like definitely and I know nowadays it's a little bit different, they do, but I would love universities to also stay relevant in this area of really figuring out, like, with the advancement of AI and with languages and newer languages, or and yeah, like I love when universities actually adopt AI coding assistants into their programs, and the new engineers coming out of unis, they code completely different to
Yeah.
what we would code at all, and it's fantastic, like
Yeah.
watching them actually
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah, and I think a good analogy from, just to summarize what you said, would be you you get to pass your driver license, but you own a Tesla, which is driveless, but just at some point you still need to take the wheel, right? Like it depends.
Yeah.
Anything could
Yeah.
happen.
Actually, that's a good point. You still
Anything
need
could
to know
happen.
how
You
to
still
Yeah.
need
drive.
you still need to
Yeah.
learn how to drive. Not necessarily with the
If you
manual
can,
with the manual
right?
gearbox, but
Yeah.
at least you still need to learn how to
Yeah.
drive. Even though your
It's a
car
driverless
can
car.
drive
Yeah.
you home, if you want
Yeah.
to. So yeah, so that's a
Yeah.
very good analogy. Yeah.
Great.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Mon. It's been great having you on the podcast, and yeah, it's been a very enriching conversation. I think I've personally learned a lot because I'm not in the space, but I'm sure our listeners have learned heaps. And you can obviously get in touch with Mon via her LinkedIn, and just follow her journey as well. And yeah, just stay tuned for the next episode. And thank you.
Thank you very much,
Cheers.
and
Thank you.
see you next time.
Thank you for having me.